Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Stand Up Speakeasy. My name is Srathney, and if you hear my nephew in the background, I apologize. He's screaming and he's about to approach his terrible twos. With that being said, I love bringing comics from the Central Time Zone, and eventually I'll branch out to the other time zones and I'll have them on as my guest. So, without further ado, from Chicago, I'm bringing on Anthony. Hey, Anthony, how are you?
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I like your hat. The do you have to say that like three times into the mirror or when you're wearing it or what?
I try not to. But yeah, I'm so excited. Like they got the reimagining got pushed back a couple times, and so I am like, all right, now that it got pushed back a couple times, I'm gonna go and save up and watch the premiere in Chicago because I think it'd be perfect.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of Chicago comics that are actually in that movie. I
Oh,
don't know.
really?
I don't know how big their roles are, but I know that they're in it. I saw them on the trailer, which is awesome for Chicago. And I don't know. That's gonna be a hard movie to top. That's a classic. You know.
Absolutely, I love it. It's like my all-time favorite horror movie. Well, all-time favorite movie across all genres. I think it's just
Yeah.
so.
I mean, I
It's
watched it like during Halloween, and I was like, let me see if this is like really even that scary. Because you know, sometimes like movies from like the '80s and the '90s, you rewatch them and you're like, that's kind of corny. Candyman like scared the crap out of me. Like when I was younger, I think I like watched it maybe like once, but then and I was like, I don't really get that. But then when I watched it over Halloween, I'm like, this is actually holds up. This is actually terrifying, and not to totally dominate the conversation and branch off because I know this is not the point of this Halloween movies, but and this is just a cool fact, which I didn't know. But it's actually even scarier when you learn the socioeconomic stuff that they're actually talking about Cabrini Green in Chicago. That those scenes are some of them are actually true scenes where people were living in the projects in Chicago, and people would hear banging on their wall, and they would call 911, and they would open up their medicine cabinet, and someone would actually break into their apartment coming through their medicine cabinet. So it's actually terrifying that it's based on like true stuff that happened in the projects and the gentrification of the neighborhood and the takeover with like condo buildings. Anyway, if you're fascinated with Candyman, that makes the movie even scarier that there's actually like historical elements to it. It's not just about a scary guy that scream you say his name in the mirror, that it's actually a lot about class and race and all that good stuff, as I completely turn a comedy interview into a very serious woke discussion.
oh man, like the special features on that movie were fantastic. Like it came out during like the LA riots,
Oh yeah.
and all that crazy stuff. And I'm like, this is such a much more deeper movie than I ever
Oh
expected
yeah,
it to
that's what I think it's cool, and I think Jordan Peele's probably up for the challenge. I think it's a big challenge. I don't know if you can top a classic though. I mean, it's gonna be tough. I don't think I've ever seen a horror movie that was remade that was better. Like all the Halloweens and Rob Zombie redid like some of those, I think, and Friday the 13th. And not that the Friday the 13th were that great to begin with, but you know what I mean. Like
be.
you're taking a classic movie and you're trying to make it better. You better make it really really good. So we'll see. Maybe I'll definitely check it out.
Absolutely. I didn't plan on falling asleep through the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I did. So it's like,
Oh, who is that? I don't even know who remade that.
me neither. But I think like Platinum Dunes did it, and like it was just like all those remakes. They just need to leave them alone because like those,
Yeah,
even though they were classy and campy, there was just something special about those ones from back in the day.
yeah, you don't touch the classics, man, especially the '80s. Maybe
So
Friday the 13th, but I think we've seen enough Friday the 13th at this point. you
indeed,
know,
most definitely,
he's never gonna die. Like we get it.
absolutely,
Same with
and
Michael Myers. He sort of eventually died in the new one. I don't even know, but there'll probably be another one when I guess they'll call Jamie Lee Curtis and be like, "You want to do another one?" Or it's just his ashes now. After you, sorry if you spoil alert if you haven't seen the new one. Lock him in that bomb cell or whatever the hell that they built.
indeed, most definitely. So, what was like the comedy scene like before the pandemic for you in Chicago?
It was really good actually. Just was getting a lot of work and working a lot of different places, going on the road, and I actually got the headline at Zany's downtown in Chicago, which was amazing. And then, yeah, talk about bad time. It's like my career was on the arc of the up and then just right down the toilet. So I think that's how a lot of people probably feel. And I think you just try to look at like all the good stuff you were doing, and you do your best to keep on going with what you can now. I mean, doing Zoom shows and, TikTok videos, whatever you can do to kind of keep busy and keep the creative muscles flowing. But it's been frustrating, because when you're doing a lot and you're feeling like you're making a lot of progress, and then to have it come to a complete halt. Although Chicago did open up for a little while, like back in, I think it was like May or June, they resumed some indoor shows and a lot of outdoor ones. And those went pretty good. So we went back to those and we did all the safety protocols and everything was good. And then the city just shut down again, and they've been on pretty much like a severe lockdown since then. So I think now they've just sort of loosened the restrictions back up again. So like, we had no indoor dining for months, and I think that's sort of starting to resume. Some of the clubs are starting to resume at like, very small capacity. Some clubs are doing online stuff. So it looks like it's sort of like on its way back, but who knows how many times it's going to do a zigzag where it like, we end up back closed again. So we'll see what happens. I'll just, in the interim, I just try to write as much as I can. I do some Zoom shows when I can. I do Zoom mics when I can. Just try to keep busy so that I don't completely throw it to the wayside and, get too stale. But obviously online shows are never quite the same, but you got to do what you can right now. So that's how I've been pretty much keeping busy.
Indeed. And what are some of your favorite venues that you performed at, and like comedy shows that you performed at in Chicago?
Well, I love all the local ones. I mean, Zany's Comedy Bar, Laugh Factory, the Improv is out in Schaumburg. I mean, those are pretty much, Zany's, Laugh Factory, Comedy Bar, Improv. Yeah. So it's like those are like the main four, and they're all fun for different reasons, different crowds in each one. Comedy Bar gets some, like more of a tourist group sometimes. Laugh Factory's younger. Zany's is kind of like an old school, like we like, straight comedy, and Improv's kind of a mixed bag and suburbs crowd. And but it's a huge venue and it's great. Yeah, all of them are great. It's really, I'm really lucky to be working at all of them, and lucky that it's like a steady work at each of them. And each one has its own little unique flair to it. And then then I get lucky sometimes and I do some road shows. So I think right before this all hit, I went on like a little mini Midwest tour. So I did Goonies in Minnesota, O'Fallon Comedy in O'Fallon, Missouri. What was the other one? There's another club up in Michigan, Coral Gables. They have a little comedy club like that, like within the venue. And yeah, so I was actually really busy last year with a lot of work, and I think I burned myself out because I did like 7 or 8 cities in like 4 months, and it was just a lot of driving and a lot of work. But just really was grateful, because you work so long and so hard to like get these opportunities, and then when they finally fall into your lap, you're like, all right, let's do this. So that you don't care that you're driving 8 hours in the snow. You're like, this is going to be worth it. And sometimes you get there and you're like, this wasn't worth it. But most times it always ends up being fun. And that's the cool part about Chicago comedy, not to ramble here, but you get really good, not just at the clubs here, but you get really good when you do all the road work, because you're going to like smaller states, smaller venues, places that don't really have comedy. So they're not really quite used to it. They're thankful for it, but they're not really quite used to like how a comedy show works. So you're sort of like really have to like pound them to like get them to respond. And once you really get that like that gift and that talent, like that knack to like really pick up a crowd, no matter what crowd you're dealing with, you then take that back to the city. And if a crowd's like half dead, you're like more than prepared to like come at them, because you've dealt with like a biker crowd in the middle of nowhere, and Bumble, Michigan, that you drove 12 hours to in the UP. So that's really what I think is helpful with comedy is, the fact that you can not only get good locally with the clubs, but then when you go out and you go on the road, you get even stronger. So when you come back, you're just that much better of a comic. So I think that's one of the cool parts about Chicago is that you've got all these opportunities around you. You get Wisconsin and Michigan, all these clubs that are just like, Minnesota that are drivable, so.
Indeed, I love Chicago, and I when I went there like about like a year or two ago, I got to perform at the Red Line Tap when it was open, and the Annoyance Theater, and they were just fantastic venues.
Yeah.
But I sure miss the Red Line Tap when it was around, but it's no longer there.
Yeah. We've had some casualties. But
Absolutely.
you do what you can do, and I'm thankful that I'm here, and especially looking forward to when things are like back to, at least somewhat close to what they were, and that might not be for a while, but you know.
Most definitely. And so for this next portion, Anthony, is questions I wanted to ask you when I was hoping to go on tour of the Central Time Zone, and these are the questions I ask every comic that I've ever interviewed. And with that being said, Anthony, what inspired you to perform stand-up comedy?
Um, I think it was sort of like natural because I was from a pretty big family of like 8 kids, so we were already, you know, acting like idiots at the dinner table and making fun of each other, and it was sort of like a survival thing. Like you either were gonna like make fun of or be made fun of, and it wasn't like all like negative. It was more just like you had to like fight for the attention, so it was type of that type of thing. And then at a young age I was doing like impressions and impersonating family members and goofing around. And so when I moved originally, out of New Jersey, which is where I'm originally from, I didn't really like envision myself ever making a career out of this. I think I just thought like, I would try it, which I did. I moved to Seattle for a bit and I did improv there. And then I came to, and I actually tried, when I moved to Virginia, I tried stand up for the first time. And then I just sort of like took a break. And then when I moved to Chicago, I got into improv, and I just knew it was always something that I wanted to do. I just didn't really know into what capacity. And I really thought, like with improv, because I really enjoyed it, that was going to be like my path. And then all this stuff with stand up just sort of started opening up all these opportunities for me. And I sort of like, I know when I know what people mean when they say they fell into something. I sort of fell into stand up. I applied to like do this like rising star showcase at Zanies that they used to run on like, and it was like a weekday show. I think it was Monday nights, and I got in like right away, and which pissed a lot of comics off because people like would email, endlessly and sometimes never get a response. And so I got in there, and then I did like a ton of those over the course of like a few years, and then I finally started getting booked to work there, and then all of a sudden other opportunities started opening up, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh, like I'm working comic now. Like it just happens. People stress about it and they wonder how it's, and it just you just kind of like keep dealing with the you know the BS that comes your way sometimes and the letdowns, and then you just keep plugging along because you have to love it. If you don't love it enough to stick through all the it's like any relationship. It's like if you really care and you really love it, you're gonna find a way to make it work, and you'll work through the bad stuff. If you don't care and you're not really committed to it, you're gonna find any reason to get out of it. So this is like a really long answer to your question of how I got into stand up, but basically my family's dysfunctional, and that's the main reason. But it just became like one of those things at like a young age. It was like I always liked making people laugh. I always liked doing impressions, and and I just knew that it was going to be something that I'd want to do. And then it just sort of happens when you aim that compass in that direction, and then you just follow it. When you'll get led, I think, to where you're supposed to be. But I think sometimes people force comedy though too. They think it's this thing that they're supposed to be doing, and then it's not for everybody. And it's evident. But
Indeed, most definitely, and that's where my comedy comes from. It's like my parents are dysfunctional, and so it's like that's. But they're the ones that instill the sense of humor into me, and that's why I'm like sick and twisted on stage. So it's like it's fun.
right.
So what was it feeling like when you first performed stand up?
Well, the first time I ever like actually did a set was at this amateur comedy competition in Virginia, and I had like waited till the last minute to get signed up because I was terrified and I didn't really want to do it, but I wanted to do it. And I think I called them the night before at like 9 o'clock at night, And I was like, hey, do you guys have any spots still open? Like expecting them to say no. And the guy's like, oh yeah, we got plenty of spots. You want to put you down? And I was like, okay. And then I like barely slept. I was like, what am I going to even do? I don't even have a set written out. And I like put together this like set, and then I was like memorizing it all night as I like tossed and turned. My stomach was in shambles the whole day. And then, you know, we got there and it was just like 200 people on this long list. And, you know, one guy was like telling me he had like a urinary tract infection because he was so nervous, even peeing all day. And it was just all these like random people. Like some guy was like, I'm a dad and I just wanted to always try stand up. I was just in this mixed bag of people. That guy ended up coming out on the stage and just started humping the floor as his act, and no one laughed. And I was like, this guy seemed so normal and put together. He's a dad, and now he's on the floor humping it, and no one's laughing. And then the guy with the bladder infection was like pacing, and he's like, I'm really nervous, man. I've been peeing all day. And I was like, well, if you get too nervous when you're up there, talk about that. That's funny. You know, then he ends up bombing, and then he says, you know, I'm so nervous. I thought I had a bladder infection. And then people started booing, and I'm like, I'm terrible at comedy advice, clearly, because he just took my advice, and now they're booing him during a bomb. But so then I went up, and it didn't go bad, and it didn't go like, you know, I wasn't like Chappelle. It was like somewhere like in the middle, and I had fun, and I was like, okay, that was interesting. And then I passed out for like the ride home because I had so much adrenaline. And then I continued to like semi pursue it. I would go to this bar, and they had like an open mic. It was called Shakers, I think. It was in Virginia and Richmond. It closed, and this girl came up to me. She's like, oh, I really liked your stuff. Do you want to do a showcase? So I ended up doing a showcase there. And then I eventually moved, and then was doing improv for so long, and then eventually kind of like found my way back to stand-up. But that first night was interesting. You know, it wasn't like some people go up and it's like, you know, God, I totally want to do this forever. And it wasn't like that. It was just like, okay. It felt like scary, but at the same time natural. And I think that's pretty much how it is now. Except it's more natural and just like a little bit scary. You know, when you learn how to control the fear and you realize this is sort of what I'm supposed to be doing, and now I'm just doing it. You know, you're able to control the nerves a little bit or anything.
Most definitely. And what are your favorite comedy specials and comedy record albums?
Comedy specials and albums. I really liked Cat Williams' new special, was very good. I liked Bill Burr's Paper Tiger. Trying to think of like what really like blew me away. Those two definitely did. I was like, how are people not? Lil Rel's special was fantastic, and no one was really talking about that. Obviously, I liked most of Chappelle's stuff that he put out. I like a lot of Taylor Tomlinson, especially her new one. I think her new one was like probably her best. You know, I've got like buddy Josh Johnson. You know, he did like a couple like his Netflix was great. Those are probably like the ones that stand out the most to me. As far as like, you know, ones that I watched, and I was like, oh man, this is really good. There was another one, and I'm totally blanking on the guy's name. It wasn't so much stand up. It was more like, it was almost like the Nets special. I'll think of the name before we're done, but he talks about his depression. So he's doing like stand up and like his path and struggles through depression. So it's kind of like it is like a stand up special, but not. I'll think of it. Ray Romano's special was really good. Around the Corner, Next Door, whatever it was called. I like that one a lot. Sam Morril has some really great specials. Jessica Kirson, who I actually got to open for the weekend that I headlined Zanies, she actually just got a special through Bill Burr. I think it's like a new special Bill Burr released or produced, and she was on that, and she's fantastic. Like if you want to like watch anything and feel like you haven't been doing stand up for more than a week, you just watch her. She's just like, you're like, how is she killing in this room of like that I just ate shit in? like she just can take any room and like destroy, and is full of energy, and she kills everywhere. And If people don't know who Jessica Kirson is, you should Google her and know. It's like people like that and like Godfrey that are just really big in New York and are somewhat household names, but should be bigger household names. Those are probably like in my fold of like people that when I look up to like comics and I'm like, oh man, like I want to be more like that. Like those are like those are the people that I watch and I'm just like in awe. Like I watched Jessica Destroy in a room on like it was like an 11:15 show. I think there was like 40 people. She's like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do the full time. You know, tired and doesn't look that big. You know, they might be half dead. And she like went up and did like an hour and just destroyed. And then I saw Godfrey. He hosted when I got to do the Second City Breakout Festival, and he hosted, and he would like do time between the comics and like destroy. I'm like, who destroys during like in between comics? Like you tell like a quick 2-minute joke that wasn't even that long, and then the whole place is like erupting. I'm like, this guy's just a monster on stage. So, you know, so when I try to like think about getting better, it's like when I watch comics, it's like, you know, comics like that. But some of
And
the answer your roundabout question, those are some of the specials that I liked and I would recommend.
awesome. And some of those guys have been and ladies have been on TV and film. And I want to know what your favorite sitcom, sketch shows, and comedy films are.
Sitcoms, comedies. What'd you say? Sitcoms, shows, and
Sketch shows and comedy films.
sitcom. I don't really watch a ton of sitcoms that are funny anyway. I've been hooked on Succession lately, which is not really a sitcom; it's more like a series. But just because the people are so terrible that it's funny, some of the stuff that they do. Um, Obviously, Schitt's Creek was great. You know, Seinfeld, stuff like that. Family Guy. What is a sketch show? I don't really have like a big sketch show that's in my, you know, in my like rotation right now. What was the other one? Comedy, sitcoms, comedies, sitcoms,
Sketch
comedy,
shows and comedy films.
sketch shows. Shit, I don't remember as far as like sketch shows. I feel like there was one, but I'm completely blanking on the name. I'm like looking around my room and I'm like, what do I have here that I like? I realized I have these like old Second City TV sketches that were phenomenal because they had like Eugene Levy in them and stuff from Schitt's Creek, and they were hilarious. But nothing that really like totally stands out right now that I can recall.
Indeed, and comedy films.
Oh man, um, I like a lot of dumb ones, man. Like I'm like, you know, Dumb and Dumber, old school. Pineapple Express. I watched that the other night and I was like, oh my god, this movie. So I'm looking at my movies now. What do I have? I have The Ladies Man, Pineapple Express, Anchorman, Dinner for Schmucks, great movie, very underrated. Borat. The new one was a little but still worth the watch. Royal Tenenbaums, Wes Anderson, Burn After Reading, Coen Brothers, stuff like that. I Love You, Man. What else do I got? The South Park movie's fantastic. Yeah, just like all like the old school Cable Guy, you know, stuff like that. Nothing
And
like totally out of the norm.
most definitely. And if you can go on tour, which you have already in the neighboring states, which comics would you like to go on tour with locally and internationally known?
Locally and internationally, no man. I don't really know that there's any locally that are really like on tour that I can think of, other than like Hannibal, which would be great because he's funny and um. But I would probably say like internationally, man, probably Bill Burr, Jessica Kirson, or Godfrey, or um, yeah, somebody like that. Probably one of the people that I know, and Pablo Francisco. I got to work with him once. He's a blast, and I could see that being a lot of fun. Yeah, probably one of those guys would be like a dream to do something like that with them.
Awesome. And if you can get roasted by 5 comedians, past and present, which comedians would you like to get roasted by?
Roasted shit. Definitely Bill Burr. uh, Probably Jessica too, because I feel like she would have some good stuff for me. Roy Wood Jr., Keenan Thompson, because I feel like he'd be like nice, but he would tell you some shit you need to hear at the same time. It'd be like a friendly roast, but he'd probably dig you pretty deep. And who else? Comics. Larry David, just because he's my idol, and he wouldn't hurt me. I'd be so happy that he would be even acknowledging me, that I would just be like, all right, cool, whatever you say.
Indeed. And where do you see your comedy journey in the next 5 years?
Oh man, hopefully, with a big comeback. I think that's been the one thing that like motivated me, was that like, everything was going really good for me, and then everything got kind of put on pause. So I'm hoping for a big comeback and, get back on the road. Hopefully, I have an agent, but I'd like a manager, have somebody sort of in my corner working on something projects wise. If a special came out, that would be fantastic. I'm actually trying now to release my 1 hour that I filmed at Zany's onto like as a YouTube special. So hoping that takes off, and that hopefully could lead somewhere, whether that's like a Netflix thing or a late night. I don't even know if late night will ever come back. It'd be the same that we've ever imagined it as, but that would be, I guess, something like that, where it's sort of like is the fruit of all your labor, and you have some notoriety moving forward, so that there's a lot of momentum, so that you don't have to like do all the brunt work of like sending out emails and sending out avails, that like someone else is there, like being like, you got these cities, you got these dates, and this is what's happening. And just to sort of have somebody like working for me in my corner, and really making sure that my bookings are regular, and I'm, back at it, and doing something cool, and maybe getting into like, an acting role in a movie, auditioned for a couple movies in COVID, and awkwardly, through like self tapes, and hopefully like some kind of like a comedy movie or a role in that, or not. I feel like the more rounded I am, the happier I am. So if I'm having a ton of time and a lot of fun, obviously with my TikTok scrolling on the bottom of the screen, and I also upload them to Instagram too. But those have been a blast, and I guess that made me realize how much I actually really enjoy doing comedy sketches and writing them and acting. So like some way that I could be involved in that realm, or maybe like a writing job. Basically anything that's going to be consistent and help pay the bills, and also allow me to perform as well, so that I can, have a better stability to my schedule. That would be my biggest goal, would be to be being paid consistently again, and have a greater form of stability in any capacity, whether that's through writing, performing, specials, and something that's going to kind of keep my progress on the arc up, rather than just flat. And that's not to say it was flat when this ended, because everything was certainly going up, but to continue that arc, and then maybe level off to a point where I can be working regularly and making money, and actually feel like I'm making a splash, rather than just on a local level, maybe more like at a national level.
Indeed. And you answered my next question, which was like, which other forms of comedy would you venture off into? And you've done improv, so you going to venture off into sketching, comedy writing, and acting. And so for the next question would be, what was your favorite joke a comic has ever written?
Oh God. I don't know if this is the best joke that a comic has ever written, because I can just tell you that this has been in my mind for like since I heard it. So I'll probably say that Drew Michaels' joke about cheating is probably one of my most favorite jokes of all time, because when I listen to it, I'm like, it's so simple, but it's broken down on such like a cerebral level that I crack up literally when I heard it for the first time, and when I hear it now. If you don't know Drew Michael, it's not for everybody. A lot of people don't care for his comedy, which is fine, or they don't care for him as a person. But that joke is undeniably one of my favorite jokes about just if you just Google in Drew Michael cheating. I think he did the joke on his Netflix special, so it's probably on there, but you'll probably find a more raw version on YouTube if you do some digging. And it's just so simple, but it's so smart, and it which is a lot of his stuff. It's like it really makes you get in your head, and you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And I think that's what I like, especially when it's like really dark, sharp. You're like, what? Like I shouldn't be liking this, but this is like sick, and I'm like laughing. And I think that's what I like about his style is he like suavely, like the devil, just sort of like pulls you into this dark abyss, and you're like, how did I get in here? I didn't okay this. And that's why I like it. It's so different than my stuff, and I think it's such like a severe contrast that I think that's why I end up liking it, because it's not like mine at all. It's not like high energy. It's not observational. It's like just the painful stuff in life that you go through, and that joke about cheating is really like up there. And he's got a lot of other ones, obviously, too, that go a little bit darker than that. But that's probably like the one that, like, when I think of like jokes that make me crack up today, even after hearing them like 30,000 times, I still laugh at it.
Indeed. And Anthony, what experience would you like your audience to take with them after a set is over?
What experience? What?
Would you like your audience to take with them after a set is over?
What do you mean? Like what experience? Like what that? Oh, that they would share with someone else? You mean after?
Yep. Like what do you want them to take away from your set?
I just would hope that when people leave, they're not like, disappointed, and that they feel like they're like, I actually thought and I laughed and it was smart and interesting and I forgot about my problems, and I think differently about him than any other comic that I've seen. I want it to be like an experience, like at a museum and you see like a piece of art and you're like, oh my God, like that's a very unique piece of. I want people to look at it with like that level of like, oh man, I didn't think. So I've had somebody say that to me before. Like I never really liked comedy, and then I saw you perform, and it was like I was like laughing and I was into it, and that's those like the reviews that I want, is like where people are like watching it and being like now turned on to comedy rather than turned off, and not put off, and also that it was like a unique experience of something that they never had experienced before with comedy. Kind of like a ride at Great America, where you're like, oh, I was not expecting that, It's like a boring roller coaster that you're just like, oh, there goes his career.
Awesome. And Anthony, as you were nominated as my guest, this is the Stand Up Speakeasy, and it's like the Roaring Twenties of Prohibition, the secret society of stand-up comics. So you have to know someone. And so, with that being said, Anthony, which Chicago comics would you like to see on a future episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy? You can name as many as you want. So
probably my buddy Pratik, Srivastava. He actually opened for me at Zany's when I headlined, and he crushed. And he hadn't really been working at Zany's regularly, and people were like, who's this guy and why is he not working here? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I picked him to be the opener. And he actually just released an album that I hosted the album before COVID, and he just released it, and it's actually #1 on iTunes and I think on Amazon Music right now too. So you could check out Pratik Srivastava. The album is just called Nick and Sheila's Kid, and it's top to bottom. It's great. We did 2 shows on a Friday and then 2 on a Saturday, and he combined the best takes from both of them, and every show was sold out, and it was really good. There was nothing that like fell flat. It was top to bottom. Like it's a great album. So check that out on iTunes, and yeah, that's definitely a comic you should consider.
Absolutely, I'll definitely reach out for sure, and also, please follow Anthony on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. That's scrolling on the bottom there, and trying to get your social media up, because I know how much of a big deal it is to some certain clubs that your numbers have to be up with those things. And so I'm trying to build up your social media with all that, with this interview. And Anthony, are there any final words you'd like to give out to the audience at home watching?
No, man. If I don't get like at least 100 followers from this, I'm gonna come find you in Florida, and it's gonna be the show with my Candyman hat on. Like, where's my followers?
Indeed, sounds great. If not, I'll meet you in October, because that's when the movie comes out, and I'll be there. Right. And
I'll show up in line, and be like, what are you doing?
Indeed, sounds great. Awesome, Anthony. Thanks so much for being my guest on the show today, and it means a lot to me. And I'll piece it together, and I'll send it your way and all that good stuff. And for everyone else at home, thank you so for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy. Be well, everyone, and wear masks and take care of each other.